watching Liverpool is literally an emotional roller coaster ride. Liverpool 3, Newcastle 2 is a game that we can't even speak about in terms of tactics alone. It was a game of emotion. It was literally a game where we needed to see who wants to win the fight more than the other. And I'm very happy that Liverpool came out on top, because for moments in that game, it didn't look like it was going to be that way. Now, let's try and make sense of this emotional roller coaster and see how Liverpool won the game, but what we need to do to win the next game coming, which is Arsenal at home. Now, firstly, I want to big up two players. Firstly, Dominic Szoboszlai, who is a player that we've been looking at very closely since the signing of Florian Wirtz, because we thought he was going to be replaced in that number 10 position, but we saw Arne Slot deploying him in various positions, including at right back, where we saw him play in this game, and he had a fantastic game at right back. And I want to big him up, because not only because he had a fantastic game, but also because he had the concentration to switch up when he moved on to that midfield position later in the game, and still had the concentration and the quality of decision making to dummy that assist. I think that's a Dominic Szoboszlai assist. Nobody can take it away from him except the statisticians, who will give it to Mohamed Salah. But to have that concentration throughout the game, playing multiple positions in the same game, is just amazing from Dominic Szoboszlai, and we didn't see a drop in his work rate. Now, there are still factors in his game that can be improved, such as how sometimes he might be a bit careless when he has the ball at his feet, and not have the understanding that in the lower positions in the field you can't take as much risk with the ball as you do in higher positions in the field, because the consequences are much harder and much stronger in those positions. But that's something that he's going to have to learn if he's going to be playing in those deeper positions. But I think this also leads me to another player who needs to be bigged up, which is Virgil van Dijk. I think one thing we are starting to notice now in the defensive frailties that Liverpool have been showing from preseason and in the past few games is that we have players in the team, especially in defense, who need to be walked through the game. And previously, in the previous season and before that, the only player that needed to be walked through his defending was Trent Alexander-Arnold. But in this new setup, we have Milos Kerkez, who is playing on the same side with Virgil van Dijk, who literally needs to be walked through the game, because his decision making and his concentration at times is not where we need it to be for a Liverpool. And we saw that in this game, that it didn't have very much of a good game, because he was letting players go, and he was taking risks, such as not going for the ball when Bruno Guimaraes was climbing all over him to head that goal in. So Virgil van Dijk has the responsibility to walk him through the game, and also walk Konate through the game, who didn't have such a good game and hasn't had a good game in a while in a Liverpool shed this season, from preseason even. And that is a very hard task. And previously you had other leaders in the team that also led in the way that Virgil van Dijk leads, which is speaking to them and constantly yelling out instructions to these players and allowing them to know where they need to be. But if he has to do that with literally everyone in that back line, that's a heavy job. It was a bit better when we had a leader who speaks in midfield, and in Hendo, and leaders in Virgil van Dijk who speak with the defenders and basically constantly talking everyone through the game. Now we literally only have Virgil van Dijk, who is a leader, who's yelling out instructions and speaking in the game, because most of the time the coach can't do that alone. And the leaders that we had, especially in this previous game, are leaders who lead in terms of how they play the game. I would say Gravenberch was leading in terms of how he was playing the game, and it was amazing, but he's not the type of leader that will be speaking and pulling people into positions and letting them where to drop and where to go at times, and I think it's going to be a bit better when we have Gravenberch and McAllister playing together in that midfield, because McAllister is that type of leader who's constantly speaking to his partners and letting everybody know to be careful of an attack or to position themselves better. But that's enough for that. I think we saw an improvement in our defending, and it's a bit funny to say we saw an improvement in our defending when we conceded 2 goals, but the 2 goals that we conceded both came from set piece opportunities. We didn't concede as much chances in open play, and that's an improvement from what we saw in the previous few games. The problem that we had, apart from set pieces, was that if we had very fast attackers coming at us, we opened up very easily, and we were very easy to open up on the counter attack. We didn't concede as much counter attacks in this game as we did previously, and that's a good plus. But we need to work on those set piece problems, and I think it's partly a lack of concentration, a lack of taking responsibility for your men, and a combination of just the other team having players who are very turned on for those set pieces. And that should be worrying going into a game where we're going to be playing Arsenal, who their biggest weapon is in set pieces. So we're going to need to brush up on those in training in this entire week. But in terms of the opportunities that we conceded, both of them were set piece goals, and I think the first one was just Milos Kerkez didn't take responsibility for his men, and the second one, I thought our line was very high. It was a very high line, but credit to Newcastle, they were very up for this game. They played the very emotions of the game, and the crowd was behind them all the way. In the first half, I thought we controlled them. Even though we didn't control the ball, we controlled them in terms of the opportunities they could get and limited them to various parts of the pitch, and they had majority of possession in big parts of the first half. When we had the ball, we were very controlled, we were very calm on the ball, and Gravenberch comes up out of nowhere with a wonderful strike that leads to our first goal. And in the second half, we see Hugo Ekitike, who's just an amazing signing for Liverpool, come with a wonderful goal as well. And that means now he's scored in literally every game that he's played for Liverpool this season, and this is an amazing signing. I'm sure Alexander Isak, wherever he was watching the game from, is looking at this a bit worried whether he can come in and literally replace Ekitike very quickly in this team. But I thought we had a bit of a muted performance from Florian Wirtz. He's a young player, he's still adapting to the Premier League, and I think he's just going to get better and better. While the performance was a bit worrying in terms of lacking control and basically not being at our fluid self going forward and not controlling the game when we had the ball. I think we can take a good look at this and compare it to the times when Man City didn't really start to have their A game until it was after like 5-6 games, and they would go on a solid run and win the title basically. And I'm glad that even though we're not having the most amazing performances currently, we are still getting those points on the board. And if we can go 9 out of 9 points with this Arsenal game coming, I think that would be amazing as well. But I think we also need to credit Arne Slot and his substitutions. Quite often when these substitutions are made, we have a bit of a question, like when he made the substitution for Chiesa in the previous week. Not a lot of us thought that Chiesa would go on and score that wonderful goal that then steered us on to go and finish with the Mohamed Salah goal. And in this game, I think a lot of us expected that if Rio was on the pitch, he would make a bit of a difference in terms of our attacking and going forward. But a lot of us, I think, were getting worried because Rio and Harvey Elliott were standing on the touchline for a long time before they were subbed on. Newcastle were giving us a lot of pressure. They kept getting long throws. They kept getting set piece opportunities. They got, I think, 2 or 3 corners while Harvey Elliott and Rio Ngomua were waiting on the sideline, and literally time was running out, and literally with about 3 minutes left to play, Rio comes on, and a lot of the opposition were assuming that the game was over. And I'm sure had the game ended at that point with 2-2, a lot of us would have said, you know what, tough game, glad to have a point from St. James's Park, but not Liverpool, not Arne Slot, not Rio Ngomua. Certainly, he went onto that pitch, and with his first touch, he was already taking on the Newcastle defenders and should have had a foul or a free kick in that high position when he was dribbling past them and they fouled him. But the second touch that he has is literally sublime. But we need to give credit to the whole team, because that was the first time, I think, in the game where we literally played our fluid flowing football. We stringed a few passes together and we were looking bright and we were looking very calm, something that we didn't really show for most parts of the game, but we were looking very calm, very composed, and it was just amazing football all around. And to finish it off with a Mohamed Salah assist and a Zaboslai dummy and a Rio Ngomua finish, he finished like a 27-year-old striker. He didn't finish like a 16-year-old, and it was an amazing finish because he didn't just hit the ball. He had the concentration to think about where he wanted the ball to go, and the keeper's body was already going in one direction, so he had to hit it back to where the keeper just came from, knowing that he couldn't shift his body back that quickly. And that's why we didn't see him move to dive for the ball, because he literally couldn't. But Mohamed Salah had a very quiet game, but still had that concentration and that presence to create that assist in that moment in the game. And this football team will just give you all the emotions that you can imagine in every game. And I hope the game against Arsenal is not as emotional as this one has been. I hope it's a game where we go in, score early, control the game, and win that game. But thank you to everyone who's watching these videos. Thank you to everyone who's subscribed to the channel. We currently have 150 subscribers. Please subscribe. Let's hit 200 subscribers and continue to like the videos so that they reach more people.